Okay, well, welcome everybody. Uh, Welcome to the first in this year's SNF Rendez-vous de l'Institut, which is the series in which the fellows present their work. And it's a particular pleasure to welcome Ersi Sotiropoulos to the first of the, feels like the first post-COVID year, inshallah. Um, but particularly appropriate because Ersi was actually with us last year. And so we've been talking about how wonderful it is to see so many people here and to be able to talk and to see people's faces when you talk. She's going to talk about and from her novel in progress, which is called June. Um, I had written down in conversation with Tom Ellen, but in fact Tom Ellen is ill, so it's going to be in conversation with me. Uh, so we're going to see where this goes. Plus there's going to be a guest appearance by Marie as well. But let me just tell you a bit about Ersi. She's a poet and a novelist who lives in Athens in Greece. She studied philosophy, anthropology and French literature in Florence, and she worked as a diplomat for 8 years in Rome, which we may talk about a little bit because the protagonist of the work that we're going to hear about is a diplomat. But she's best known for her writing, for her poems, her short stories, novellas, a series of important novels which have been garlanded with prizes and translated into many languages. She's won the National Book Prize Award twice in Greece, the Book Critics Award, the Athens Academy Prize, the Dante Alighieri Prize for her poetry in Italy. She's written scripts for film and television. She's participated in exhibitions of visual poetry. She's curated exhibitions. She was responsible last year with Lynette Widder for one of the most inventive of, we have a series to which all the fellows are invited to contribute, the abécédaire, in which you speak for a few minutes on a letter of the alphabet of your choice. And I urge you to look at Epsilon as Rho, which was Ersi and Lynette's contribution to that, which you can see on the Cahiers section of our website. A novel that some of you may have read is What's Left of the Night, that won the Prix Méditerranée étrangère in 2017. It's translated rather nicely, I think, into English. It describes it's a reconstruction, really, of a brief visit that the Greek poet Constantine Cavafy made to Paris with his brother, John, in June 1897. It's a very beautiful, very haunting book. Perhaps we will talk about that as well. That whose sort of elusive quality belies the fact that it's clearly based on an incredible amount of research. You don't feel the research. It's a very, very, very special, very beautiful book. But she's going to talk now about her ongoing project. Marie is going to, I think, read at a certain point, and I've been given a list of questions that I may follow. So, Marie, why don't you, Ersi, why don't you start, and then we'll follow. I'm going to put another chair for you.
First, I would like to express my gratitude to the Institute, not the people are the Institute, to Mark, Marie, James, Eva, and now Justine, for making the things for us possible. And it's not something common. Things are happening here. And you realize this when you go back out in the real world, as it happened to me 1 year ago. So, we are in a parallel universe here. Too bad that it cannot last longer. And you put us in the door. I hope you are not, you guys, members of creative, a new sect, something else. Because it's amazing. So, the moment, for some obscure reason, or banal or idiotic, the moment I read James Allen's message from the Institute that this event was scheduled for September 29th, immediately the title Between Scylla and Charybdis lodged in my mind. but this is where my thinking a bit further about it, I realized that this between Scylla and Charybdis situation has been crossing my life and my writing. Since I was very young, that sort of tension, the dithering between two highly charged poles, for me meant clearly the dichotomy between art and life. We know how Ulysses resolved the problem. Following Circe's advice, he sailed as close as possible to Scylla, the sea monster, avoiding Charybdis, the giant whirlpool, which, as Circe said, not even Poseidon could defy. So he lost 6 companions because Scylla had 6 heads, but the rest of the crew and the boat were safe. Going back to what is here on stage here, I was saying to myself that if life is Charybdis, gobbling us up and belching out our ruins, our remains, then art should be Scylla. Art also, of course, can swallow us up. I almost lost the sight in one eye, not while writing, but while editing the French translation of What's Left of the Night, but still there is a chance to make your way in art, especially if you are in possession of certain endurance as Ulysses had. So, what is the thing? Scylla or Charybdis? Life or art? The thing is that, and since I was very young and without looking for any philosophical explanation of it, the between Scylla and Charybdis meant, while the moment I was writing, this effort to make disappear the discrepancy. And I feel, and I have felt reading other writers, that the greatest ambition for a writer, for an artist, is to cancel the distance between them. An ambition that cannot be achieved, of course. And in Mutandis Mutandis reminds me what Freud said in a different context, that it seems like the first, the most important condition for success is to go further than the father, but it is always impossible to surpass the father. So this is about the Scylla and Charybdis situation.
So can you take us from that to the novel that you're now working on?
So the novel.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The novel is June and has been has been inside me, and I have been around it for some time now. In the 80s and beginning of 90s, I served as the cultural attaché at the Greek embassy in Rome, Then I resigned. It was a very prestigious and surprising boring job. Uh, since ever then I have written about many different subjects, even about cats, which I hate, but never touched on that period, never written a line about or around the embassy years. Perhaps there is a sort of trauma here, there, who knows. Years later, after I have resigned, I heard about an ambassador I had known, liked him, and respected, who was accused and suspended for something for which he was not directly responsible. And if you want, this was the first element that fed into the novel. Then there was this poem by Hölderlin, that especially 4 lines that were haunting me for some time, and I will read them to you. So the poem goes. The agreeable things of this world were mine to enjoy. How long gone are the hours of my youth? April, May, and July are distant. I'm nothing anymore, yet listlessly I live on. So, April, May, and July. June. Georgi Somniou, an Hungarian friend and a poet, wrote a poem questioning Hölderlin's poem, and that he called "What About June?", which I translated the poem. And the title of my novel comes from that missing month in the poem of what happened. That was the second. Third was in the peak of the Greek bankruptcy. That was the years 2010, 2013. I was going to write in an apartment near Victoria Square in Athens. It was a very depressed, poor, shabby, and dangerous neighborhood at the time. And military cars were bringing refugees arriving all the time. And one day the square was full of people, families, babies, improvised tents, seats on the ground under the trees, tripods, stoves over tripods. And the next day they had vanished. Where they had been gone? Where they were driving them to? I never found out. The last thing, the most recent, was that I had to undergo a brain MRI. And then that was the moment that I have started taking notes for the novel. So, 4 disparate things, totally different between them, were slowly merging in this sort of mosaic of this story of that is, it's very banal to say, it's all, of course, between what is true and if it is possible to define the truth, and is the border between guilty and innocence, and if you can be innocent for something you didn't do, or for something you did, but absent-mindedly, I mean without any interest or without getting any advantage.
Do you want to tell us what happens in those 21 minutes, the missing minutes that he's
So
on?
the man inside, the time span of the novel is 21 minutes, lasts now. I'm not very lucky, because when I start thinking of the novel, imagining it, a brain MRI lasts 1 hour. The time is shrinking. I'm having brain MRI every 3 months. So it's shrinking, I must hurry up. So the man is inside. He's a Greek diplomat in Paris, and he had suffered from migraines, and for that reason his physician prescribed the MRI. But and of course he's worried about the result of the examination, but he has also another concern, and it is an official inquiry scheduled for the following week in Paris about a visa scandal involving refugees. And he's under suspicion for some papers he has signed in his previous assignment in Beirut. So he's there. A little before that, he was sitting at Café Le Flore to kill time before this examination, and he picked up a literary magazine and read the poem by Hölderlin. So now in the device, strapped on bed and feeling more and more claustrophobic, he recites the lines to himself, those 4 lines, and he wonders why they lingered. What is the reason? And he goes towards the missing man. So all the time, this 20, he tries to reconstruct the facts leading to the allegations against him, and going back to the point. The thing is that he declares himself to be totally innocent. He doesn't even remember signing those papers, and he can't remember what they were about. And it seems that his actions belong to that gray zone that seems to expand and then shrink and disappearing at the same time as they go up and down the sounds of the machine.
Would this be a time to hear a bit?
Sorry?
Would this be a time to have Marie read a little bit for us?
Yeah. Because I have, like I said you, Mark, before 61 versions of the beginning, and Marie is going to read one of them.
Dear God, even if I don't believe in you, please make sure I'm okay. It's hot. I'm sweating. My dear little God, please. Believe now. Believe. If you want God to help you, believe. I'll think about it later and laugh. I'll say, how long can a man go? When I was a kid and said my prayers at night, did I believe? When I fell to my knees, did I believe? 3 times for every desire, and then I would go to bed satisfied. I didn't believe. Those were negotiations. I'll be good and you'll bring me the Pac-Man game. No, you'll bring me Pac-Man and Super Mario and the remote control Ferrari. More prayers. Bargaining with God. A diplomat even then. I can't stand it anymore. I'm drenched in sweat. Something itches behind my ear. I can't breathe. I need to think about something else. What? Bang, 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 bang. I'm in a garbage can and they're banging on it from outside. How did my line from Hölderlin go? Bang, 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 bang. It stopped. There's hot air blowing from somewhere. A lit match. Sulfur. Something's burning. Nothing smells. Why am I moving? My tongue is stuck. I can't move my tongue. April, May. I forgot the line. This machine swallowed the line by Hölderlin. I'm so stupid. Deep down, I'm not worried. Everything will be fine. Overkill on the doctor's part. It was so nice at the Café de Flore this morning. No crowds, no horrible tourists. Some of them wear sandal with socks. Early morning is the only time to go. The way the light fell through the window onto the magazine, that transparent little pool lit up by the lines. Their coffee is awful. Like ground birdseed. Washy dregs. April, May, and July are far away. That was the line. Where's June? What a terrible life Halderlin lived. That doomed love for his employer's wife. When did he write that poem? When did he write it? April, May, and June are far away. I once saw David Lynch at the Café de Flore. He was wearing sandals with socks. Can you believe it? Mulholland Drive, blue velvet. I saw Eraserhead twice. I liked it a lot. Where is June? There is no June. What happened? You have to stay still. Calm your breath. If you need anything, press the button. The nurse walks away. I slide into darkness.
Thank you very much, Marie. I have a couple more questions here, but actually I'm tempted to go rogue at this point and ask you some unscripted questions, if that's all right. Okay. So the works of yours that I've read, and now hearing this, I'm struck by some commonalities. That the voice is emphatically the voice of somebody very different from you, to all intents and purposes. There's a real imaginative achievement. It's Cavafy, or it's a Greek diplomat of a male diplomat, and so on. And they're somehow, in both cases, they're suspended in time. Time stops in some strange way, or seems to stop, and they reflect. And they're in those cases, they're both out of their normal place, wherever the normal place is, if there is any normal place anymore. And so actually I wanted to, the first question I wanted to ask you was about something that I'm really curious about, which is places that you've been. And the first one is something that I know nothing about, which is that you were born in Patras in 1953. So we're talking a mid-sized provincial port town, had once been rather prosperous, but perhaps still was, flourishing 19th century town now just after the Second World War. And I'm curious to think you back to, I don't know if you grew up in Patras or if so you grew up at school. A very different world. So tell us a bit about it, please. I would like to know what that experience was, and your reflections on what that did for you as a writer, perhaps.
I was, I think, 14 or 15 when the coup d'etat, we had the junta. It's very difficult now to imagine how it was to be a teenager during those years. But now that you were talking, I thought that in a way there was a benefit from the dictatorship. And that benefit was that the books were banned. So book was like finding a book that you were searching was like getting Balenciaga free. Something. It was very. No. While you were talking, yes. I thought about. So, books became very important. For that, for instance, I have. It's always necessary to me to have the feeling of the pages. It's almost something erotic, or leaving a book, looking forward, expecting, making longer. And then go open it. For that, for instance, I can't read a book, a novel online. I need the object. So a lot of books were banished. And what to say, I had a very difficult adolescence. Really very difficult, because after 14, it was so ridiculous what was happening at school. At the same time, my only desire was to escape, and I escaped many times. My parents sent the police behind me, and I was carried back and going again, and the psychiatrist, and then that. But poetry, it was one of the biggest moments of those years was when someone, Socrates Kartsis, who was a teacher at school, gave me his translations of the poems of E. Cummings. That was an explosion. Imagining that, to realize how that was, for instance, girls were not allowed to be out after 8 p.m. Some professors from school volunteered and were going around in the streets to catch us. I mean, then this universe we had at school should be like 5 centimeters under the knee. And of course I put it there, and I was going till the end of school. I was going. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you.
No, then I had, that was a short, I mean, I had a reconciliation with the town after I wrote Zigzag Through the Bitter Orange Trees. The book brought me back to the town.
Can you say something about that, perhaps? In what way did it bring you back to the town?
Because all that is happening, Zigzag is a zigzag between 4 main characters. Young is happening at the turn of the century, and is also a zigzag between the city and the village, something that in Greece it's very common and has been. For instance, remember many times a taxi driver asking me, and now summer was approaching, saying, are you going, where is your village to go? And I said, I don't have village. You don't have village? Find one. So there is this zigzag going, etc., and bringing towards Peloponnesus this part. And after all these years, writing that book and having a very young character, 12 years old, that was not at all like me, but who starts writing, but has, and being with her there, I said, I felt in peace in some way. Not that I start loving the place, no, but I felt more interested, more friendly. And then Zigzag had all the story of accusations by Plevris for pornography, etc.
Yeah, so, I mean, what interests me thinking about your work and your life is that there are countries, I think Greece is one, that have changed immeasurably over the last, in ways that are difficult to imagine. I think of Greece changing more than a country like France.
Yes,
that you grow up in this very specific, extremely conformist, sexually rather repressive, post-Civil War atmosphere of this strange town that has one face turned towards an idea of Europe and culture and Italy and civilization, another face turned towards mountains, peasant villages of the Peloponnese. It's caught somewhere in between the two, right?
All this, it was very deeply rooted, all this feeling of decline.
Of decline. But then what's...
Family going, the thing that the Italian opera was coming, etc. Till then, my mother has was quite very clever at the same time. Has this idea of the bourgeoisie de Patras, where she belonged, that very high idea, but that didn't exist anymore. Was kaput, finished.
And it's interesting to me that you moved towards literature. You moved towards that high literature, some of which she would have approved of. You move to a model, and you go from Patras to. I mean, I was in Bologna in '81, so it wasn't. But what I remember is there was this milieu of endless students, Greeks who had fled the dictatorship. They'd never left Bologna. They were all Marxist. Everybody was a Marxist. Whatever their income, everybody was dreaming of revolution, right? And so you go from Patras to Marxist revolution on the streets of a highly urban culture, no?
France,
Okay.
I went to France, not to Italy.
But you were in Italy to study, no?
Yeah, but then I fell in love in the border. For that I moved. This was the reason.
I'm curious about this moment of the 70s, this moment of Marxism, of migration, of being in these big urban centers.
There is part of the life in Florence. I was in Florence in those years that was really very luminous. We didn't have much money, very little money, but we were open and many things were happening. For instance, the groups of autoconscienza, of women autoconscienza, that were feminist groups, but involving psychoanalysis, involving this, the way this. I'm not talking about all groups, and I'm not talking about the Greeks, because the Greeks were usually the syllogos of Greek students. They were very boring.
Club of Greek students.
They were very boring, but there were a lot of things happening. Yeah. I mean, there were American underground cinema. There were many things that you can move, and there was a continuous discovery. And at the same time, those years, even when I went, the junta was over. But thinking of it now, the Greeks that were arriving, let's say in 74, 75, or 70, to study in Italy, they were not coming like young people are going now with some idea, with some plan of what they want to study or what they were living. And they were not all coming from wealthy families. I remember in Florence there was the son of a plumber who came to study political science. This is to say that there was not this anxiousness of to find what you could do afterwards, of an orientation. There was no pressure. Someone was coming to study, I don't know what, theology in Florence. Then going to Greece, he would find, hoping his parents some way, they would find a job in some office, in some public service. It was relaxed. I mean, it was much different of what happens to girls and boys when they turn, not even before, from 15 they start thinking about their career.
So I'm interested in how these experiences help us to understand the book that you're writing now, because there's a man of a certain generation.
Yeah.
He's now trapped in a very ambiguous moral world. the moral world of 17, 18-year-old in Florence in the 70s with the junta in Greece was not at all ambiguous. You knew what you were fighting for, right? Now is in this ambiguous zone, is in a professional zone. There's some sense of a generational, that for the book is like a kind of thinking about a generation. I don't know, perhaps that's wrong.
And what the world that is like going away slowly is disappearing. The world, it's it's in pieces now, in pieces that are disappearing. The thing is that the last decades.
Why don't we swap microphone? Okay. Good.
Sorry. I'm sorry. What was the question?
You said the world is disappearing, and there is a kind of. I suggested there's a moral ambiguity now for this.
I guess that has happened all the times. That has been possible all the time. The case of this, the ambassador I knew, who was in Beirut, also was a sort of contract that they asked him from the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There was an MGO, MGO that they are going to how it is the all this that the mine what is it? Demine. Who got money to demine parts in ex-Yugoslavia and then parts in Lebanon. That was a Greek MGO that was very much pushed for the right hand of Giorgos Papandreou. So they never did anything.
Right, it was a scam.
It was a scandal, and he signed the papers without go to check what has been. But he was, there was not something he could say, I'm not, I don't agree. But it was something ordered that came like something that, a project from his ministry.
So the last question from me, and then we'll turn it over. My question, I don't even know if you even want to think about it, but my question is, yes, these things happen. Why do you think it spoke to you? You heard about this and you wanted to write a novel about
what I don't know what I want to write about.
Okay, but it spoke to you in some way, this story.
Yeah.
Why do you think?
If I knew, it would not be interesting.
Fair enough.
You know, in a way, the Scylla and the between Scylla and Charybdis, let's say in a very banal way, in my case now, could be at this point, after more than 2 years around this thing, I have the story, I know the plot, everything. I have conducted some research, and in technical terms and in terms of craft, I could go on like a machine and write the book all at once. But this is not interesting.
Right.
What I expect when I write is the unexpected,
Yes,
to be surprised,
yes,
some sudden twist that will force me to dig into something else and be carried away to unknown territories. Because if I knew since the beginning, what's the point? I mean, it would be very boring. Because the work is itself, the act itself of writing, it's boring, it's graceless, it's tedious. I mean, but what you realize is, it is funny, that these discoveries, these epiphanies that happen like during the process of writing, it happened like out of the blue coming. They would never exist, they would never materialize without those tedious hours, the interminable hours of writing the same paragraph. Never. So I don't know.
Thank you. So why don't we turn this over to anybody would like to comment or ask a question from the floor? Please.
Thank you. That was really fascinating. I'm struck in hearing you speak about how much you like poetry. You mentioned Holderling, and even the Odyssey is, of course, not a lyric poem, but it's an epic poem. So it seems like a lot of the works that you love very deeply are poetry. And then picking up on Mark's comment about how all of your work, which I haven't read, I will admit, is interested in the stopping of time.
Sorry?
I'm putting faith in Mark's observation that your work is interested in the stopping of time in arrested moments, which is something that people often associate with poetry. But basically, my question is, how does poetry influence you as a writer? And why are you a novelist rather than a poet?
No, I'm going... I come from poetry. My first book was a collection of poems. Then I turned into fiction, and I think that was because with fiction gives you the impression, or rather the illusion, that you can control your life for a longer period of time. So I need discipline in my life. Also, I was reading poetry, and sometimes it's writing, but less. Sometimes lines of poems were inserted in prose in a book, but in a way not apparent to the reader. So, 1980 was my first book of poetry, and 38 years later I published another book. I used to think that poetry abandoned me. Then my mother died, and it was not only what was happening, only poetry could express. Prose would be descriptive. So, and then perhaps abandoned me again, poetry. Writing decides, it's not me that
Thanks very much. I was interested in your main character is about to put his head into this machine.
Sorry?
Your main character is about to put his head inside this machine.
He's inside the machine the whole time.
He's inside the machine, and then we're inside his head. And I was very struck by the immediacy. He's responding. I'm sweating. You're not just in his head, you're in that exact instant as he responds to every sound or thing around him. I was wondering, is that taken through the book? Do we stay that closely with him? It was an interesting series of compressions in that way.
So I don't understand the question.
Did you understand the question, or shall I?
No, explain it to me. If I'm getting
So
my
the extract,
idiotic-
it's all right. The extract that we read, we're in the man's head, and he's in the machine, and it's very claustrophobic. I mean, you're right in there. Is that going to be so for the whole book?
Of course not, because I cannot handle it. Very boring for me too. No, it's the beginning that you don't... no, of course not. Yeah, it would be boring. I have a technical problem. It is the first person, present tense, that can be very boring sometimes. It's very... I know that it's very fashionable. Perhaps I'm going to abandon it.
Because I liked very much the third person in the Gaddafi book. It works very well.
Yeah. The third person that is first, but it's the third.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I may change it.
Yes.
I
actually have several questions, and thank you for the presentation. And I like very much how you were openly speaking about traumatized moments of writing. That's very important, and I think refreshing. And I also, yeah, you were mentioning disappearing worlds of certain generations, and it is like a society is losing a collective memory also of some moments of common history, losing the memory of itself, thinking particular, having particular visions of reality. And then when you're writing with a person who is representing these lost visions, you are practically saving them from being absolutely lost, or not? What is, have you a feeling?
My focus is there, because I can write for someone that's 12 years old now. I'm observing what is happening. And the idea of saving something, you can save, also saving a moment, very particular, very intense of some person. I'm not interested in what happens to me. I'm interested in the lives of others. So it's true that there is a world that is a generation, last decades, one generation after the other, go on without being connected with the tradition anymore as it happened before. This accumulation of experiences stop passing. And as the world, the virtual part is eating part, the visual part, like in the cave of Plato, with through media, the financial world, how it works now that is not concrete. The role, the importance of tradition, of the passion of experience is less and less important. The law also is getting less important, less, it could be necessary, but doesn't count anymore. What means a community life? What meant, let's say in Greece, in the villages, the connection that was there, that is, it's destroyed. Caput, finito.
Thank you.
But I don't write with something, having some noble idea inside me. Of course, I mean, not that I have bad ideas, but I try, it's like an investigation that has to do also with the writing itself.
Okay, but then somebody who will read it will be might be also disconnected from the experience you're describing if it is like collectively lost. I'm speaking about it because I'm a part of society which is undergoing different crises and also losing collective memories, and it's just interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, perhaps I didn't get it right. What I want to say is that you can pass various things, ideas, opinions that you think they are right and they are good and people through a book. But this can be a trap. I mean, a book, it's not a sociological work. You have to be very careful to don't turn it into a manifesto, let's say, or a brochure. The ideas have to come in a way like from the writing, from the story, but not like declarations, isn't it?
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ersi.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry to ask another question, but listening to you speak made me think for the first time of the relationship between diplomatic language and poetic language. And maybe what they have in common is silence, the unsaid.
The diplomatic language, at the end, I was very good. I became.
Yes.
I mean,
and
writing, because I had to write speeches, etc.
I loved
But
your
I
line about...
forgot everything. It was
But what you said about your being a cultural attaché being a surprisingly boring job, and then reading this stream of consciousness, being in the diplomat's mind at this moment of breakdown, and maybe that being the moment that he finally is able to speak freely. And I wonder if that was also your journey into writing,
but
choosing...
You know, the thing is to make it interesting. I mean, it's not that I was... I always that I spoke freely about the time, and even when I was there, not outside, but among there. And I have many anecdotes. I mean, stories that one can't believe what happening. But it's not that I'm so interested in writing a chronique about that. There will come various aspects, but otherwise would be a chronique, and maybe, I mean, I'm a little bored for a chronique. I'm waiting to find out something else. I don't know. It's like the novel in progress is like being in suspense on the air, and all I have is this obsession for something deeper, more complex to air. But perhaps will never come, and the novel will never be finished.
So I'm interested in your comment that you said, I'm interested in the lives of others. So that's so it's not autobiographic, it's not historical, it's not sociological, but it's sort of the lives of others. And yet, I'm just wondering how much you portray these figures that you write about also in a particular context, and I think Mark was alluding to that. There's a particular flavor to them, they have a particular role. So I'm just wondering how you think as a writer about the relationship between these people that you observe and that you describe and that you're interested in, and the life that surrounds them.
The people come together with their lives that surround them. For me, when I write, I mean, the others are like the forbidden fruit. I have to go and take a part of it.
But it comes from the person.
And then, of course, while I write, things that have happened to me can, and in a way that is not always planned, can become characteristics for a totally different person. For instance, in Cavafy, I hate nails. I hate cutting nails. I hate hearing someone cutting his nails. No, Cavafy. I put that like a characteristic to Cavafy. I need to speak out about this. Yes, because, I mean, my Ferrante in Rome, when he wanted to make me feel nerves really, he was coming with a little scissors.
Well, Ersi, we could. You went into this like somebody facing the executioner's axe. So I'm glad that you're still alive. And why don't we all go and continue the conversation over something to drink?
Yeah.
Join me. Thank you.